Hey, I want to welcome our viewers to the day after Thanksgiving. So, we're here in the studio with Laura Kelly. Now, about a month or two ago, we scheduled, but I didn't show up for the podcast. So, this time I had her come into the studio. Now, I will have to be here. So, Laura, thank you so much for being with us. Please introduce yourself, who you're with, and who you serve so our viewers will get an idea of who they're listening to.
Thanks for having me, Pete. Glad we could work it out.
Yes, me too.
So I'm Laura Kelly, and I am the founder of Empower Recreational Therapy. We are a mobile recreational therapy service, pretty much hubbed in the North Atlanta, Marietta area, and we travel to our clients or communities. We typically serve age 50 plus. We do have a couple outliers. But if I'm at the point where if we can help serve somebody and I feel like we have the right connection with the therapist, with the client, we will absolutely do that.
That's awesome. I know we met at a physical therapy support group, and I was blown away by the way you command a room and the way your energy level was off the chart. So how did you get into recreational therapy?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Most recreation therapists, it's not typically our first major. We typically run into it later. So I was your typical athlete when I was going into college. I just wanted to play basketball. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I was a fitness exercise science major. While I enjoyed the physical aspects of it, just felt like it wasn't 100% of a good fit. Unfortunately, my father, he suffered a stroke my freshman year of college, which Pete has met my father, which is incredible.
Same energy level. Yes.
And unfortunately, when my dad had his stroke, he sometimes, when you have an acute stroke that's as immense as his was, he would sometimes, what people would call, was non-compliant with traditional therapies. And he would either not show up or refuse or would be discharged. And my teammate who was actually taller than me, looks at me and she says, "Did he get a rec therapist? Does he have recreational therapy?" And I said, "I've never heard of that. What is that?" And when she explained it to me, I was thinking, gosh, that's exactly what my dad needed. And he never got access to that when he had his stroke. So I thought to myself, gosh, my dad, his nickname is Disco Joe. He likes to fish. He likes to dance. No one's tapping into who he is as a person during his therapies, where sometimes, as beneficial as traditional therapies are, it's sometimes focused on what we can't do, where a recreational therapist has this unique ability to really figure out the person in you and how, might be a little bit different, but how do we bring that back out? And I wanted that for my dad. So that's kind of been carrying him throughout this entire entrepreneur experience.
Well, you mentioned entrepreneurial experience. So for our viewers out there, what was that transition like for you? Because I know from talking to you and others, recreational therapy is not one of the therapies that's picked up by insurance.
Right.
So a lot of times it has to be, I want to have somebody like yourself come in. So, talk our viewers through that entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. So when I finished my master's degree, I got hired at a skilled nursing facility in Marietta, and I had great administrative support, started my rec therapy program there. And it was truly something that was even missing from where I was hired, where sometimes traditionally recreational therapists, we kind of get hired as an activity director, right? Where both are needed, activities and recreational therapy. So that's kind of where I really started learning, okay, this is missing. How can I bring what I've learned to the table? And then also took that into the senior living community space. And after about 10 years of doing that, every once in a while, I'd have somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, can you work with me on the side?" And I would say, no, wouldn't even think about it, and then it just got to the point where COVID hit. My mom fell, broke her wrist, and she's my father's caregiver. And I was like, okay, God, a lot of stars aligned. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe this is the time. I can help my parents move. I'll quit my job. My husband was supportive. But I won't lie to you, Pete. It's hard to test a market. I mean, I know that there's a lot of need in this area, but it's not like I could say, oh, let's see how this other recreational therapy company is doing in Georgia, right? So this was something where I started with one client. That's where it all began. And proud to say now that I have a full-time program manager, and we have several rec therapists that help support this model to truly serve the community.
That's an awesome to take our viewers through that. But at what point? So, how many years has it been since you've been on your own?
So I officially applied for the LLC August 2020, and I left my job January 2021.
Okay.
So by the time I moved my parents down here from Pennsylvania, I really kicked off our website and actually promoting it about April 2021.
Okay.
So it's been just a really rewarding experience to see the community embrace it and just trying to, as an owner, do slow strategic growth.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I like the idea that, I ended up going from before Medicare to after Medicare in my treatment with my physical therapy. And I saw that when I had 1 month before I was 65, the bill was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30,000.
Wow.
It was about $3,000 out of pocket.
Yeah.
When I clicked and turned 65, it was basically, once I hit my deductible, which was a couple $100, I pay nothing.
Wow.
So it's an easy decision for anybody that doesn't
Sure.
have to pay.
Right.
So why would somebody decide that I need to start paying for the help I need as an individual? What would be that mindset that you have seen?
Yeah.
People, let's focus on the seniors.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like it's so different for each person, right? I do think there's some people where maybe they just finished physical, occupational, and speech therapy, and now you're going back into your home environment. And for some people, the printed off exercises, here's your exercises, do that every week. For some people, it's not realistic, right? And I just think recreational therapy can really be that branch for wellness where for a lot of seniors, it's not appropriate for them to be doing things on their own.
Right.
And honestly, for some seniors, exercise is not enough. What am I exercising for? Mm-hmm. Right. Sometimes we need something to actually be a part of, have that purpose. I love this quote. A physical therapist gives you the strength to get out of bed. An occupational therapist gives you the tools to get out of bed. A recreational therapist gives you a reason.
Whoa.
And I think that really puts it, it takes a village, right?
Yep.
You need the strength, you need the tools, but then how are you going to live your life, right? So if you were somebody that enjoyed being outdoors, or you like to paint, but now you might have some different cognitive or physical challenges, a recreational therapist, it's our job to adapt that and not only get you back into what you were doing, but opening up your mind of doing new things that you would have never thought of. And, obviously we're mindful of people's budgets. So if it's something where it's like, hey, I have X amount of dollars, we're going to work with you and we're going to try to maximize getting right to what you need as soon as possible. So just think meeting people where they're at and opening their eyes to really what life can be.
Well, I want our viewers also to think about this. And I have a concierge medicine person I go to called Practice MD. And a couple of them would say oh, that's expensive. Yeah. And I'm saying a couple $100 for your health. Wait until your health goes downhill. Then is it expensive? So I think keeping the body moving is so important, and a professional like yourself with the training and the understanding and working with people, you're going to be able to guide that person through that recreational therapy. And I love that reason. I mean, I think that makes so much sense as our why. Sure. And I had plenty of times I had people print out things, but are you doing it correctly? Like Norma said downstairs, are your feet lined up properly?
Right.
So I, as a rookie, an amateur, I'm supposed to figure those things out, look at a picture and say, oh, are my feet lined up properly? So what do you see like the biggest challenge with getting people moving again in the correct way?
Yeah, it could be cognitive for some people. It could be the motivational factor. I think that's what makes recreational therapists unique is a lot of the people that we're working with, they may have dementia, they may have Parkinson's. It could be a gamut of different diagnoses. And unfortunately, for some people, that diagnosis becomes their identity, right? So unfortunately, we get some clients that don't leave their chair or they don't really leave their house. And it's our job as rec therapists to not only go in there and introduce them to things, but also provide them outcomes. So I like what you were saying as far as Why would people want to do this? And I think for some people, there might be that misconception or that challenge of, well, I don't want to pay somebody just to have fun, right? Recreation, I don't need that. I don't want to pay for that. Where recreational therapy, we are just like physical, occupational, and speech, where we have a full standardized assessments. We will come up with a treatment plan. You have individual goals that we are tracking. And then we give you those outcomes, and we're working together on a day-to-day basis of, hey, what goals are you reaching? Which ones aren't you? So I think sometimes people look at it as, oh, you're just the fun games gal. And it's like, actually, we do use evidence-based outcomes. And we want to share that with you so that, if we're only seeing you once or twice a week, what are you doing those other days? And how can we empower you throughout the week to continue those goals?
That's really enlightening. Why don't you share, we're here at Overture, which is the 55 and older active community. What challenges do you see? And I'm just going to hit an age group.
Sure.
75.
Okay.
Somebody that hasn't been moving as much.
Yeah.
What would be the path that you would take them through to start getting those physical abilities back?
Yeah. I think
generally,
sure. First, it really comes down to getting to know that person, right? Because 175-year-old, you've met 175-year-old.
Right.
And tapping into that person, developing that rapport is very important. But really coming in and just, where are you from? What did you used to like to do? What motivates you? We do different scales that we can really tailor into the physical, cognitive, and really by the end of our assessment, we can really look at all those dimensions of wellness and actually put numbers and qualitative data behind what you're telling us. But then as a rec therapist, I take a step back and I look at, what is the big picture, right? And, what are you doing possibly at Overture in your house, but are you getting out into the community? Just talking to Norma downstairs, she was like, I would love to continue going kayaking. I don't really do that anymore, right? So I think just opening up their eyes to, don't think about what you think you can't do. What do you want to try?
Right.
Right. And then really finding out from them, what do you perceive as your limitations? And then what are your limitations? And then just really going through that as a therapist of, okay, we might not be able to eliminate all of these barriers, but how can I minimize those? Where we're focusing on your strengths, but then we're also working on your goals.
Yeah, that's so important. Like you say, the individual, really zero in the individual. I know back, I think it might have been 6 months ago or maybe less, you had contacted and we were talking about a grant that somebody had for kayaking.
Yeah.
So they got specially designed kayaks.
Yep.
Talk to our viewers about people that reach out to you, that knowing your background, your experience, and how they can really partner with you.
Yeah.
What would be somebody's motivation to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as recreation therapists, we specialize in adapting recreation experiences, whether that's indoor or outdoor. So we had the opportunity to partner with Catalyst Sports, who they are an adaptive sports company in Atlanta who didn't have the bandwidth to have enough rec therapists to really keep it going. So it was a fabulous partnership where they were able to secure the monies and have the kayaks, and then we were able to help support with the trained staff, right? So if you're a company out there where you're serving individuals with any kind of disability, we'd love to partner with you to not only expand your recreation opportunities, but also to provide outcomes. Right? Maybe you're doing something where you're not collecting that outcome. We can help you with your participants figure out, hey, it's one thing for somebody to say you're changing their life. It's another thing to say you're decreasing depressive symptoms. You're having less dementia-related symptoms, right? So to be able to actually prove that what you're doing is working and impacting their life, to me, is half of it. The other half is them telling their story.
Yes, that's, everybody has a story, and it sounds like you're taking that story of what activities they used to enjoy, and then fast forward through their life, they're at a stage where they've got to kind of adapt to a different body, so to speak. I love what you said downstairs when we were having breakfast. There, when you worked at Sterling and you were the activities director, there are places that have a full-time person, and then there's places that bring in people like yourself right now.
Right.
Can you speak to that? Like, what do you see in your experience out there in the market?
So, when I used to work at skilled nursing facilities and seeing people discharging back into senior living communities, I would always, not always, but I would notice the recidivism trend, right? What's missing? Why do people keep coming back for rehab? Right. So I had the opportunity to work as the wellness director at Sterling Estates for 2 to 3 years. And it's, I would say Sterling and Holbrook are some of the few senior livings that I'm aware of that actually hire staff that are either trained in exercise specialties and they're, part-time, full-time positions that are actually dedicated to those seniors. And I would say most senior livings in general do either, they rely on their activity directors to kind of do a lot of different things, which can be stressful for that activity director who's trying to meet basic engagement needs.
Right.
And then also try to. So I do feel like the senior living models have embraced contracting out to kind of support that wellness model. So Empower Recreational Therapy, we love going into senior livings to help bring that extra level of knowledge and support, whether it's to that existing wellness team or to a team that's just like, hey, we've got activities that are fantastic and great, but we can't meet every single need on our own, right? So we go into senior livings. We've done Parkinson's specific classes. We do water classes, brain classes. So again, we can kind of bring that same model of fun outcomes, right? But also, guess what? Your assisted living residents are paying just as much as your independent living. They should have just as much access to those amenities. So we try to help kind of extend that branch. So they're getting in the pool too.
Right.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And I love our viewers. Sometimes we get a little bit up there and we don't think how important the brain is. It's still operating at full capacity unless you have something that went on physically.
Right.
What would you do with people that have kind of those challenges? What are you talking? How are you helping them in that area?
You're saying with cognitive and physical? Yeah. I love the evidence. We do a Parkinson's class that I have learned, and I know you know all about neuroplasticity. That's a big part of it, right? And a big part of neuroplasticity is learning something new, right? And that's the biggest thing as a recreation therapist is, how can we actually teach somebody something? That's the best thing you can do for your brain is that repetition and doing that. But I'll share one thing of evidence that I love. Whenever you, for example, let's say one of our Parkinson's classes, micrographia is really common where your handwriting gets smaller.
Okay.
Before you work on handwriting with a Parkinson's client, you actually should have them do 2 minutes of cardio first at about 80% maximum intensity, because the research has shown that your brain is more sticky, right? After you're at that certain level of breathlessness, that you're actually going to pick up retraining that body and mind after you've had that short burst of energy, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we try to bring into our treatments is if we are working on cognitive, it's intentional and we're trying to pull in evidence to support it.
Wow, it's nice to hear your answer in that area that, I think for our average viewer, it's not something we think about, but it's something we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
What I've always wondered this, and I think maybe our viewers have too, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy are covered in most insurance plans. Why do you think recreational therapy is on the outside of the therapy circle for insurances?
Yeah, let me stand on the soapbox now.
Yeah. I know that was a loaded question.
But I've had the great honor of being on the American Therapeutic Recreation Association, serving on their national board, and we continue to advocate for our profession. I think timing is a lot of it.
Okay.
Those associations were formed early and we're part of those Medicare plans, right? We've been fighting and, we don't have quite the financial capacity that the other PACs do, right? It's not like recreational therapists. We have about 18,000 nationwide, where you might have physical therapists, they might have 18,000, in
a state. Yeah, exactly.
So we don't really have the bandwidth necessarily, not unless that's somebody calling to give us some money. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we'll take it. We'll take it with strings attached. We'll do our job.
That's
go ahead. Yeah.
But we do have those national entities fighting for us and getting on bills. And we just don't have the huge financials behind us yet, at least, but we are trying to get a part of the 3-hour rule. We're fighting for state licensure in each state. So we are doing some great things. One thing I will say
Mhm.
is we have had in Power Recreational Therapy, we've had some success with long-term care insurance,
Okay.
actually fully reimbursing it. And then just the 2 grants this year that we've been a part of, because I realize that financials, I don't want that to be a barrier, right? So the adaptive kayaking grant with Catalyst was huge this year.
Mhm.
And then partnering with the Aloha to Aging for, we won a grant this year from the Parkinson's Foundation. So we have free classes for a year. So if you're
Oh.
someone out there that has Parkinson's, we do a free class in Marietta
Mhm.
once a week. So we can work on that handwriting. No.
Yes.
So we are trying to diversify, right? Where obviously we realize that can be a barrier for some.
Yes. Do you see, like, in your work, an increasing amount of dementia and Alzheimer's coming on in the last, say, 10 years? Is there, in your work, are you seeing an increase?
Yeah, I think some of it is diagnosis. People are actually, I think some of it's a good thing in the sense of people are getting diagnosed. Whereas I think 10 years ago, a lot of people might have been, having it, but not realizing it and getting it diagnosed. So I think there is that aspect of it.
Okay.
But yeah, when I started when I was 2010 at Manor Care, a lot of those clients were people coming in for rehab were kind of your knee replacements and discharging. Now you might have a fall, a stroke, and dementia on top of it, right? It's just the acuity has really increased in general. But yes, dementia and Parkinson's, I would say, are the 2 diagnoses where I've seen just increased needs from the community of in-home care and within senior livings and memory cares, and just really having the right people in place to support those diagnoses.
Well, it's interesting to hear that. I've always kind of wondered that those kind of things, and I have a person that I rely heavily on, Jim Quick, and he wrote the book Limitless, and he talks about the brain, how the iPhone introduction created a way. It's almost like we have a digital second brain. And, do you remember all the phone numbers you used to remember?
Right.
No. Do you remember how to get to a place? No, you just hit a button, GPS takes you there. So it's taken a lot of our muscle power away from our brain and shifted it to a digital device. And so it's so important. This is a muscle. And it's a muscle that if we don't use it, you hear the old phrase, you lose it.
Right.
So I just kind of have heard him talk about that. And I know that it seems like it makes sense because I don't remember numbers like I used to, but I can remember my phone number from 50 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that was when I didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
So how can our viewers get a hold of you?
Yeah. So we have a website, empowerrectherapy.com.
Okay.
And then you can also, my cell phone, 717-793-0687. I'm a Pennsylvanian, so I've kept it, speaking of those phone numbers,
yes.
A Northerner, I've kept that since high school. But yeah, reach out to us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can contact us through the website.
Right.
I'm also just, as you can tell, pretty open. Call me, just have a conversation, right? Even if you're just a OT-PT that wants to connect, I'm happy to have a conversation.
And I could literally talk about this topic all day long.
Me too, Pete.
Yes.
I don't know if they would stay.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So my golfers, we can talk golf. Right. And I'm sure there's some viewers that love hearing about the recreational therapy journey. But before we go, we always ask our guests, like, when you're not working, what do you like to do for recreation?
One of my things that have been new is disc golf.
Okay.
It's a lot cheaper than golf.
Yes, it is.
And I can still use my long limbs, and it's still a lot of strategy involved.
Right.
And it gets you outside. And so I've really been enjoying learning disc golf.
Well, I have a couple of discs, and I do play disc golf, but I like regular golf before, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
So for our guests, we always want you to, well, first we're going to put links in the show notes. So if you're driving and you hear Laura, don't be alarmed. You don't have to remember everything she said, although there were some gold nuggets in there that you do want to remember. But those kind of things, we're going to make it easy for you just to put in the show notes. But what would you want our viewers to take away from your experience and how you can share with our audience?
It's personal to me, right? My family my mom's been taking care of my dad for 20 years, and he's had some other health issues this year. So, when a client or a family comes to me, I view that as my family, right? And I know what it's like to be in that situation, to have health impact your family, right? So to me, whether you're sitting at home by yourself or whether someone else is taking care of you, you are not alone, and you do not have to be defined by your disability. We're here to help you live life to the fullest.
Awesome. Well, Laura, we want to thank you for being a guest, and thanks for showing up. You know that I have to show up in my studio, because and it was probably better than over Zoom to have you here at Overture. And thank you so much for visiting with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Pete.
Okay.